Good evening, everybody. I'm Jimmy Abbott. I'm the priest here at Holy Comforter Episcopal Church in Spring. This is our Wednesday night Bible study. The couple things about tonight, we have a microphone set up. We're getting really high tech now. So if you could please respond back if you can hear us any better, or if it's too loud or too soft or whatever, that would be a great help. So Mom, I know you're going to be watching tomorrow, so please email me. Second, this is probably the most intense philosophically and intellectually of our sessions. So don't be scared off, but it's a little bit more dense than some of the other ones. Just a word of warning on the front end. So one of the questions that always comes up in theology courses is how can we say that there is a good, loving God in the face of such evil in the world? This is sort of always comes up. The theological term for it is theodicy. And it's both natural suffering and human evil. So earthquakes and tornadoes and things like that, as well as despicable people doing despicable things. So the question is sort of, how can an all gracious, all loving, all powerful, all knowing God allow such things to happen? And there are sort of a few different ways to approach that question, but I was wondering if has this thought ever crossed your mind?
Only once or twice a year for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I think some of what you do is you think about it, and at least I come to the conclusion that I don't have the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to decide what it is I can believe that I can live with. Because I don't know the answer.
Yeah, and that's one of the hard things, is that there's really no way we can ever answer this. But it always comes up, and I remember this vividly, both after September 11th and Hurricane Katrina. People, it was almost like cliche. How could God let this happen, right? And so that's the question. How could God let this happen?
Well, every generation has some incident where that thought comes up, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we're going to kind of walk through, first of all, we have a glossary of terms. For y'all out there, I'll write down the ones that are kind of hard to weird words that I'll write down for you. But first of all, nature of God. Have you heard some of this? That God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-present. So omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Is that a sort of fair assessment of some of God's attributes? Is that all right, Jerry?
I would go along.
Okay. We got to start somewhere. So that theodicy, that word, is the theological task of justifying God's existence in light of evil. So we have to say, all this stuff has happened. How could God be there? Does God really exist in light of all this stuff? It's a tough one. Any thoughts on that?
Well, God's Son suffered, so you assume God was there when that took place. So if he was unwilling to take his son down off the cross, perhaps
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So one of the sort of traditional pushbacks against that is, well, that kind of makes God into a jerk a little bit. That almost the language has even been taken so far as like, is God an abusive father, allowing his son to undergo such humiliation, suffering on? There are a lot of mental gymnastics in this session, but no, I mean, it's great. And that's actually sort of where we end up. But okay, one of the other ideas is nihilism. Essentially, the rejection of all religious or moral principles, it boils down to life is meaningless. Y'all ever read Nietzsche? This is, yeah, exactly. Life is meaningless. Humans don't have souls, or there's nothing. We're just amalgamations of cells and carbon.
It's the most hopeless reading I've ever done.
It's
It's like, oh gosh, don't make me read that again.
What were you reading?
Philosophy in college.
Oh,
And I really do think that Nietzsche is like the only true atheist.
Yeah, maybe.
Because, you know, because I mean, man, he really goes for it. Okay. Gnosticism, the religious worldview in which the truth is secret or hidden and only revealed to those with the correct knowledge. So the word gnosis in Greek means to know or knowledge. So Gnosticism is this religious belief that there is truth out there, but you have to know the secrets to have that truth revealed to you. So there are some Christians who are Gnostics. This usually comes along with the rejection of the material world. The material world is evil. It's the sort of spiritual, intellectual, inner world that is true. Then we have Manichaeism. Worldview in which there are two opposing dualistic powers, good versus evil. A sort of yin-yang approach. This isn't even really God and Satan. This is some sort of good force and an evil force. And usually the good force is from the spiritual world and the evil force is from the material world. Epistemology. Do you remember this from college philosophy?
No.
The study of knowledge. We'll get to that. And deism is the other sort of word we'll throw around. Religious belief that God or a God created the universe but is now removed from its workings, called the watchmaker theory. This is God has created the universe, set up all the rules, has let it go, and then has stepped back and just let things run their course.
All the science majors I knew thought that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to sort of say you can believe in God, but also sort of remove God from ever intervening in the world. And it's a great way to explain, well, not a great way, but a way to explain evil and suffering, in that you say, well, God created the world this way, and these things just sort of happen in that type of creation.
well, we have that in the Bible too.
Mm-hmm.
The rain falls on
Mm-hmm.
good and evil alike.
My ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts, says the Lord. So yeah, there is some of that.
And there's also a lot of dualistic powers of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Eden story.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that Diet Coke is getting to me. Yeah, there are lots of stories like that in the Bible. It's interesting, though, that it's not clearly like that, because, like you say, in Job, that God calls together the heavenly council. And who shows up in the heavenly council but Satan? You're like, wait, Satan's in the heavenly council? How does that work? Okay, so the problem of natural evil. 1755 Lisbon earthquake. Registered somewhere between 8.5 and 9, as we can sort of, as geologists go back and surmise. Killed somewhere between 40 and 50,000 people. It's interesting that it wasn't until this earthquake that thinkers, philosophers, theologians first considered how could God have let this happen.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so it's interesting that, I mean, they were thinking about it, but this was really the point where it was sort of really kind of took the theological world by storm, and people started asking some of these questions.
I was wondering why you chose that particular.
Yeah, I mean,
pastor.
right? No, because I could pick a lot worse ones, right?
Yeah.
The tsunami from the Indian Ocean in, was that 2005? Like there are a lot of worse things, but this was really the catalyst for theologians to start considering this seriously.
Well, when you consider the population of Europe that
Yeah.
they knew at the time,
Right.
this was very significant,
Mm-hmm.
percentage-wise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad stuff. Okay, so some possible explanations. I had fun with these.
1755, wasn't there still a large Muslim presence in Spain at that time, or was that before this?
Most of them had the Moors had largely been expelled by then.
By then,
Yeah.
okay.
16, whatever it was.
Yeah. El Cid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot of history right
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Okay, so some possible explanations for natural evil, and of course, Hurricane Katrina, any of those sorts of things. Number one, God willed these things to happen, but we cannot know why. This is the sort of Gnostic explanation. That light. We are epistemologically cut off, right? That there's no way that we could know why that thing happened, but we think that God made it happen, but we can't know why. What do y'all think about that explanation?
I think it's tidy, but I don't believe it.
Yeah,
I don't think God wills something awful to happen. I think he may use it when it happens, but I don't think he says, I think I'm going to make a hurricane wipe out the whole Gulf Coast. I don't think that happens.
Yeah. It's sort of because, I mean, yes, because the sort of pushback is always, well, hurricanes are not inherently evil. It's just there happen to be humans who live there. That it sort of is. Same thing with earthquakes or tornadoes. Like,
There
well,
were a lot of sinful people that got caught in that, and a lot of religious people.
right,
that got
exactly, yeah. But that being said, you read some of the things in the Old Testament, and God sends the flood. Well, that's really number two. God was punishing those people for sinful behaviors. So the problem with that, of course, is yes, there were righteous people also who we would imagine were caught up in that, and also, why isn't there a hurricane at my house? Because I'm a pretty sinful person, but not, a tornado hasn't touched down my house. There are definitely sinful places in the world that earthquakes have not swallowed up. Yeah, I think that just makes God into a jerk. Yeah. But what do you think, Jerry?
I don't know. I was just thinking over. I've been around where a lot of things did happen, and somehow they never happened to me.
One of the lucky ones, or the righteous ones.
The righteous ones,
yeah.
Well, at that time, I wasn't very righteous.
Number three, this is the work of another wicked force at work in the world, struggling against the one good God. So this would be Manichaeism, that it's really this other God or other force who creates earthquakes and whatnot. Which to me then says, well, God is not powerful. I don't know. I just can't imagine the sort of that another power would have such power as that, or authority. Number four, who cares? Life is meaningless anyway. The sort of nihilist take on it. Well, they're just, amalgamations of cells, so they're dead, whatever. And then this is the watchmaker theory. God did not necessarily will this event to happen, but God did create a world in which evil could happen.
I think we've all thought in those terms, all of those terms, at some time or
Yeah.
another in
Yeah.
our life.
Yeah. We probably have. Yeah. So I think, say like the tsunami. I think we can also kind of put these things on sort of polar opposites. That on one end, you have the nihilist who says, I know for sure that there is no meaning to the world and that these people died, they're dead. At the other end, then, you have the Gnostic who says, I don't know, and there's no way that I can ever know, but I do believe that God somehow maybe made that happen or whatever. And then in the middle, you have the Manichaeist, who would say, well, there are two opposing forces.
So it's a continuum.
Yeah, it is. No, it truly is. And this is sort of, this is, for absolute certain, there's no way you can ever know because truth is a hidden secret. So as Christians, what do y'all think about this? Sort of reflecting on it in the Christian light.
Well, I think there's elements of all of it in the Christian life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Except maybe the nihilist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a real extreme for a Christian.
Yeah, it is. It would have to be a pretty mangled Christianity.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To say that life has no meaning, that we are not souls, that it's just a sort of, yeah. And I think the Gnostic, the sort of sense that we can never know why, and we can never know God because God is hidden from our eyes. I think that's also a problem because we do know God in the person of Jesus, and that
we know a lot about God.
Right.
But do we know God? I think thoughts you don't think.
No. I mean, sure. So we can't know everything, but we have a sort of hint. We have the scriptures, we have sacraments, we have worship, we have lives of prayer and the saints that seem to give us images and glimpses into God. So the sort of extreme Gnosticism just doesn't seem to stack up. And then Manichaeism, like I said, I think it says that the powers of darkness have more power than they actually do. Because I think God has much more power than the power of evil. I don't know. Those are my reflections as a Christian, but do y'all have any other thoughts?
It makes my head spin.
Yeah, good. So say after the tsunami or after Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ike, what did y'all feel as Christians? Like how were you responding?
Oh, that there was a lot of human suffering involved. Mm-hmm. But I don't think any of this type of thought ever really entered into it. It was, we really should be doing something to help those people.
Yeah, I think in the case,
but I don't know, this type of thinking, this philosophical thought about it, I don't think ever occurred to me. I've been out in that part of the world and I thought, shoot, that's happened there before.
Yeah.
Krakatoa, for instance, fell all over the world when it blew up. And that was only a few miles from there.
Yeah.
So I don't think the philosophical, just that there was a lot of suffering and can we do something about it?
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't think when it's a natural disaster, my mind goes to this. I think when it is a personal disaster, when a
Right.
child that's 2 years old has cancer and suffers and dies, then I have a problem. Then's when my mind goes to this style of thinking. But you know, when there's a hurricane and a lot of people are hurt, I have the same feeling you do. It's what can we do? How can we help? How can we relieve the suffering? Not why did it happen? You know, it's happened. It's in the past.
Right.
It's taken place, and I just sort of put that aside. But when it's a personal level, when it's somebody who's suffering, that's when I can go to this.
That's interesting. So that'll be our next
Thank you.
category. Yeah, that's good. The only sort of and just from what I've heard from people who are not Christians and talking to me about this stuff, the sort of, you know, well, if your God is who you say your God is, why would he have created a world in which there could be earthquakes and hurricanes and whatnot? You know, sure, we know that earthquakes are necessary for geologic plates to move. But so that the question back is, well, why didn't he create a world in which geologic plates didn't have to move? That if you sort of say, well, if God could have created any type of world that God wanted to have created, why did he create this one?
Well, then go back to why did he create man the way he made man, with a desire to strive against something. We seem to always need to be doing something, to be going someplace, to be making something happen. And if we had a real stable world, there wouldn't be any place in this world for a man with that kind of personality.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll go on to human evil. Yeah, I know what you're saying. The sort of the natural evil. You're like, you know, this is where the sort of rubber hits the road for me. Okay, so you see, I have sort of listed there some of 20th century's finest figures.
I think we just covered philosophy 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, sure. Not even close. Yeah. But, so Hitler kills 69 million people. Stalin somewhere around 30 million. Pol Pot, you know, a real lightweight. You know, only responsible for the deaths of 1 to 3 million people.
Yeah, but look at what a smaller community he had to work.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So these are all pretty despicable people. So the question is, why didn't God intervene? If God is truly all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present, how could he have let these things happen? And then
he did stop them. They're not existing any longer.
Well, so why didn't he stop them earlier?
All of these are history.
Well, why didn't he stop them earlier? And I think it also then, you know, gets to Lynn's point. What about the child with cancer? What about the child soldier? What about the people suffering from Ebola? You know, you can really sort of take these things out. What about
aren't we all looking at this from the point of view of a man, a person who only has one life? God may have an entirely different view of what life in this world is really all about. And that if there is really another life beyond this one, why is a little bit of suffering and a little bit of trouble in this world so important?
I think it's because if the Christian does say that God created us and created us as good, very good, as Genesis 1 says, then we have
That's
to know
what
that.
I was thinking about.
Right. Then we have to say that, like, human life at some very basic level is valuable in God's eyes, and the sort of this wanton human suffering, it has to at some level run against what God wants for people. That's the way I read it. Is that not convincing, Jerry? Maybe not even convincing. Is it persuasive?
I think point I was trying to make is that he has a whole different
Yeah.
viewpoint of what life is all about
Yeah.
in this world.
Fair enough.
And that our viewpoint is a very limited one,
Mhm.
whereas he's looking at it from the viewpoint of
Mhm.
all eternity.
Mhm. Do you think you would be different if you were living under Pol Pot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You have to think that those millions of people, some of those millions of people, cried to God for help.
Mhm.
And you have to think they felt abandoned.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
had to. I mean,
Yeah.
they had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the same sense that, I mean, we see this all the time. A teenager is killed in a tragic car accident, and the mother and father
I'm just.
feel just totally, abandoned by God. Yeah. So the question is, why, God, how could you let this happen? And then we're going to get my possible explanations, of which I actually came up with one more at the early, so I have 10 possible explanations.
Well, this doesn't exactly answer that question, but it's another thought along the same lines. I've known a lot of people in South and Central America and I've known them personally, that were really, really poor. Squatters living along a railroad, for instance. And I was welcome in their house, and I never could get over how happy the children were, how the mothers and fathers accepted their life just like my mother and father accepted it. And they were old and died of old age at 36.
Mhm.
They did not have an unhappy life.
Mhm.
It was the only one they knew, and they had
Mhm.
made the most of it. They were happy people.
Yeah.
And I've seen more than one group of people like that.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't answer your question exactly, but it shows,
Yeah.
it shows that
Yeah.
there is. Why do we assume that all these people that don't live in the United States are unhappy?
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. I think it's but have y'all heard of the axiom reductio ad Hitlerum? This is
Not only are we going to know Greek.
this is
Latin.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, that's what I'm saying. Because not only did we learn Greek last week, this week
And of course it's pig Latin, really. But this is because if you ever read online articles, like if you ever I don't know, CNN, whatever, if you go to a website that has any sort of news article about Christianity, if you scroll down to the comments, at one point somebody is going to mention Hitler as like the sort of the jugular, right? And so this is saying that every argument eventually reduces down to Hitler as like the sort of ultimate boogeyman. So reductio ad Hitlerum. So that's essentially what we're doing is we're saying, okay, yes, there's lots of little stuff in the world, but let's try to look at the big ones. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so my 10 possible explanations. Number one, God does not exist. Plenty of people believe in this explanation, that there's human suffering in this world, and that proves that the all-loving, all-powerful God is not there. Number two, God does exist, but God is a jerk. Or God just doesn't care. Number three, who cares? Life is meaningless anyway. Our old friends, the nihilists. Number four, which is a really scary one, those people deserved it.
I don't want those people to live next door to me.
No. But, so we say, again, take the Holocaust. Right? 70 years removed, we're like, oh my gosh, that's awful. But I mean, some of the Germans at that time really did believe this. So that this actually isn't. So in a weird way, we see this clearly as evil. But number 4, what we see as evil, those people see as good. And that's the really scary part that I see in that explanation.
Which one are we talking
Number
about?
4, those people deserved it. So take the Germans at the time who were like, yes, this is purifying of the races and all that, that we see that as pure evil, but they would see that as good. And that really freaks me out.
Well, and they also saw it as the Jews were the reason for their economic woes,
Right.
and therefore they were never going to be in that position again.
Right.
And so
Right.
as a result, they deserved to be destroyed so that they weren't gonna,
Right.
it was kind of kill them before they get us.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't agree with any
No,
of
of
that,
course
but
not.
That, but
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. And so in a way, they're saying that their suffering is validated or is commendable because it helps our position. I mean, that's what I think probably some of the Germans thought at the time. Okay, number 5, those things never happened. We know about this, right? I mean, it's sort of fringe groups, but people who deny that these things ever happened. Number 6, our old friends, the Gnostics. There was a purpose to these evil things, even if we cannot see it now. Which to me, it's like, oh, that's also a really dark place I don't want to go to. Number 7, humanity is composed of terrible individuals. As a race, we are irredeemably evil. I've heard people, sort of.
I don't believe that.
No, I don't believe this either. But you come across this every once in a while.
Well, I think you could say that. I mean, I heard us say last Sunday in Sunday school, you could say that there are people who have to be confined because they can't be reformed.
Right.
So although the last part of that might not be something we believe, we might believe the first part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you could say Hitler was a terrible individual who was very charismatic and got other people to follow his will,
Mm-hmm.
and led to all of this.
Yeah.
You might say that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the weird thing is that 7, it does have a little bit of truth to it.
It's not a truth I like, but it's
Right.
truth.
Yeah. Number 8, God is not.
Wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
Jerry doesn't agree with that.
I don't see any truth in that at all.
You don't?
That humanity is composed of terrible individuals.
There are some.
Well, there are some terrible
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah.
There are
That's-
some.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's not all humanity.
No,
Yeah.
the second half I don't agree with, but the first half, there are some. I think there are some people who, and it may be a matter of their mental capacity as such that turning them around is impossible. They are terrible individuals today. Could somebody do that? I don't know, but I don't know how.
Don't we put people in prison for sort of things to keep
Yeah.
them away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
society?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which, of course.
Is that an awful thing?
Depends on whether they live next door to me or not. Yeah, that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, but I think as an explanation to sort of understand all of human suffering and human evil, it doesn't. Yeah, you're right, Jerry. This explanation doesn't stack up. This is an interesting one. God is not omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent all at once. So rather than sort of this being a human thing, you get to change the nature of God. That you either say God knew it was happening but couldn't do anything about it, or God could have done something about it but didn't know it was happening. Which is pretty sneaky, right? It's a pretty sneaky little argument. I don't really buy it.
Yeah.
That one you could talk about quite a while.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, and that one's really densely
Right.
theological because it's
Again,
the nature
that's
of God.
changing the problem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you've just
You
changed
got
the whole
no
rules.
problem.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a second. Then you have a new problem of figuring out who God is. Okay, number 9, human evil is attributable to free will. This is just how the chips fall. And this is getting closer, I think, to what we were saying, that, hey, some people are evil, some people are good.
Yeah.
And this is the cost of having free will.
I think there's a lot in that.
Yeah, there is.
Because how could we have free will without imagination?
Mm-hmm.
That the two go together, and somebody's got the imagination to create a community like Hitler did, or like Pol Pot.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that was the results of human nature or
Right.
human imagination.
Right.
No, I think there's something to that.
I-
However, I do say all of these things are in the past,
Yeah.
and that they were corrected
Yeah.
over time.
But again, think about it right now. The
What about the Inquisition? That
Yeah.
didn't last forever.
No, of course not. But take, say, like the child soldier right now in Uganda. To me, it would be really hard to say that is completely attributable to free will, because that child probably does not have their own free will.
No,
They've been
that's a
forced,
different question.
right? They've been forced into this, and they are committing atrocities that who knows if they would have committed if they weren't in such a position.
I think that some of these things apply sometimes and some of them apply other times.
Yeah.
Because, if you're talking about Hitler, maybe we would pick one or two of these that
Right.
might apply.
Right.
On the other hand, if you're talking about a situation where you have a child soldier or you have someone that's involved in human trafficking and that kind of thing, maybe there's a different answer to that kind of evil. So
Yeah.
perhaps there's not just one kind of evil.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're probably right. Yeah, I think you're probably right in that.
Could we say all evil is of human origin? What about your baby?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then that gets into, is that actually a natural thing, right? Rather than a. Okay, let me give you the 10th explanation that.
We're interfering with your program.
No. Like, the answer is, I don't know. Do you remember Plato, the allegory of the cave?
Maybe.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay, so and this is sort of a Gnostic view, and it's an interesting way out of this this question. Okay, so there's a cave shaped like this, and there is out here sort of a great fire or a source of light shining in this way. Human or a man, some dude, I don't know, is here looking towards the back wall of the cave, but he's stuck or chained and in such a position that he can only look at the back wall of the cave. He can't turn his head.
Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. It's an allegory for who we are as humans, that we can't really ever take a transcendental step. Okay. Between, or sort of in front of this great light source, all sorts of creatures and things, and this is my animal, my sort of unidentifiable animal, that walks in front of the light source. Faith said it looked like a headless cat. That maybe, okay, let's make this into a cat.
Like a turtle.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a turtle. Let's say this is a cat.
It's going out.
Yeah, sure. Or it's other way. It's walking in front of the fire, and it's casting a shadow here, so that we as humans, only see the shadow that is cast. And it's not a true depiction of what this thing is. But we can't, because we can't turn our head to actually see what this is. And in fact, we don't even know this is there. We are epistemologically cut off to where we think this is the world, when in reality, this is the world.
Well, this is another explanation for God. It represents a lot more than just what is in this world.
Right. And then in the allegory of the cave, it sort of ends up that the man, or chains are broken, and he turns around and he walks out and sort of sees the fullness of the light, and sees reality. But it's an interesting way then to explain the world, first of all, and then sort of explaining evil in it, that what we see here is really just a shadow. We don't actually know the sort of the true spiritual reality of what's going on.
I think we've mentioned that several times during the course of the meeting.
Right, exactly. And this is really where this idea comes from. You can go on YouTube, you can actually watch a claymation of the allegory of the cave. That's pretty hilarious. But it's an interesting concept.
Is this Plato?
This is Plato, yeah. I don't really buy it 100%, because again, it seems to be saying that this world that we see has no value or meaning. When if we do believe that God actually did create this world, then it must have value and meaning and be, sort of loved by God. So that's why I don't completely buy the allegory of the cave.
But I think it does reference that we all interpret what happens based on our experience.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
So, if your experience is to be facing this way and you had no experience with facing the other way, you have no clue why that might have happened.
Yeah. And Christians, of course, have taken this and that this sort of turning around and then looking this way is like the conversion, the baptism or whatever is turning and seeing reality for what it really is. Yeah, based on experience. I think you're totally right. So it's helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know if,
It points in a direction I think I like.
I have some of my seminary professors would be horrified that I just made you on the Platonist or whatever. Now, any other sort of responses to any of this? Pretty dense stuff again. Okay, so the classic Christian response is summed up in the word nevertheless. These are awful, evil, unspeakable atrocities that God did not will. Nevertheless, God is the loving, gracious, and merciful creator of the universe. And Linda, this gets back to what you said at the very beginning. The innocent Jesus died an awful, evil, unspeakable death on the cross. Nevertheless, the loving, gracious, and merciful God. It's being able to take those two ideas and hold them in our mind at the same time, that they appear to be contradictory, but we know both of them to be true. So it's to say, yes, Pol Pot, Stalin, Hitler, Hurricane Katrina, the tsunami, all awful things because they killed and destroyed thousands, millions of people's lives. That being said, we still believe that God is the loving creator and sustainer of the universe. It's essentially saying, yes, there was a Good Friday, and yes, there was an Easter. There's a seminary professor in Austin who says he wants to put 2 bumper stickers on his car. One of them is, I'll say the nice word, crap happens. And then right under it, put God is my co-pilot. Which I think is genius, right? To say these two things they're both true. And that this we say is Good Friday, and then this is Easter. Which I think is genius. Can you imagine driving around with both those bumper stickers?
He has a real sense of humor.
Yeah. but that's, and I think that really does sum up the theology, and I would say most serious theological task of theodicy is flawed because we are trying to justify God's existence when it's God who justifies us and creates us. And that gets back to what you were saying. This is not our perspective, and that the Christian has to say, our perspective is Good Friday. We know this story.
We've got the Trinity, which is a way of solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 3 different ways of looking at God that have been given to us.
Mm-hmm.
But those are only the human ways. Well, there's another way of looking at God that we don't have.
Right.
And it's just a mathematical problem. You break it down into little pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. So that was 45 minutes on theodicy. And you see what I mean? You know, we didn't crack open our Bibles in a sort of intellectual, philosophical exercise. But I think it's an important one to have because these people are asking of us, and that we have some responses. Yeah.
No, we should have answers for these.
Yeah. This is the big questions. So thank you for joining us. Again, please let me know how the sound was. You can email any questions or comments, jimmy@holycomforterspring.org, or you can put your comments directly in the YouTube comment section. Thank you so much.